Okay, we should be getting started now. Your life.
Okay. Salãmun Alaykum, everybody. I'll just start with our Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. So, for this Quran study session, I am reading from Surah 18, the cave, Surah 18, the cave, verse number 16 to approximately verse number 42. So I will recite the verses first and then make some comments afterwards, God willing. So starting at Surah 18, verse 16. The seven sleepers of Ephesus. Since you wish to avoid them and their worshipping of other than God, let us take refuge in the cave. May your Lord shower you with his mercy and direct you to the right decision. As a footnote, the footnote is Ephesus is located about 200 miles south of ancient Nisan and 30 miles south of today's Izmir in Turkey. The dwellers of the cave were young Christians who wanted to follow the teachings of Jesus and worship God alone. They were fleeing the persecution of neo-Christians who proclaimed a corrupted Christianity 3 centuries after Jesus, following the Nicene conferences where the Trinity doctrine was announced. In 1928, Franz Miltner, an Austrian archaeologist, discovered the tomb of the seven sleepers of Ephesus. Their history is well documented in several encyclopedias. Guiding teacher is a prerequisite. You could see the sun. You could see the sun when it rose coming from the right side of their cave, and when it set, it shone on them from the left, as they slept in the hollow thereof. This is one of God's portents. Whomever God guides is the truly guided one, and whomever he sends astray, you will not find for him a guiding teacher. And the footnote for that verse is the sign or hint tells us the cave was facing north because the sun was rising on the right side and setting on the left. Verse 18. You would think that they were awake when they were in fact asleep. We turned them to the right side and the left side while their dog stretched his arms in their midst. Had you looked at them, you would have fled from them, stricken with terror. When we resurrected them, they asked each other, how long have we been here? Have we been here one day or part? We have been here one day or part of the day, they answered. Your Lord knows best how long we stayed here, so let us send one of us with this money to the city. Let him fetch the cleanest food and buy some for us. Let him keep a low profile and attract no attention. If they discover you, they will stone you or force you to revert to their religion. Then you can never succeed. Connection with the end of the world. We cause them to be discovered to let everyone know that God's promise is true and to remove all doubt concerning the end of the world. The people then disputed among themselves regarding them. Some said, let us build a building around them. Their Lord is the best knower about them. Those who prevailed said, "We will build a place of worship around them." And the footnote is, as detailed in Appendix 25, this story helped pinpoint the end of the world. Some would say there were three, their dog being the fourth, while others would say 5, the sixth being their dog, as they guessed. Others said 7, and the 8th was their dog, saying, "My Lord is the best knower of their number. Only a few knew the correct number. Therefore, do not argue with them. Just go along with them. You need not consult anyone about this." Remembering God every chance we get. You shall not say that you will do anything in the future without saying God willing. If you forget to do this, you must immediately remember your Lord and say, "May my Lord guide me to do better next time." And the footnote is, this important commandment gives us daily opportunities to remember God. 300 plus 9. They stayed in their cave 300 years, increased by 9. And the footnote is, the difference between 300 solar years and 300 lunar years is 9 years. Thus, discovering the end of the world was predetermined by the Almighty to take place in 1980 AD or 1400 AH, 300 years or 309 lunar years before the end of the world. See 7227 and Appendix 25. Say, God is the best knower of how long they stayed there. He knows all secrets in the heavens and the earth. By His grace you can see, by His grace you can hear. There is none besides Him as Lord and Master, and He never permits any partners to share in His kingship. You shall recite what is revealed to you of your Lord's scripture. Nothing shall abrogate His words, and you shall not find any other source beside it. Quranic study groups. You shall force yourself to be with those who worship their Lord day and night, seeking Him alone. Do not turn your eyes away from them, seeking the vanities of this world. Nor shall you obey one whose heart we rendered oblivious to our message, one who pursues his own desires and whose priorities are confused. Absolute freedom of religion. Proclaim, this is the truth from your Lord. Then whoever wills, let him believe, and whoever wills, let him disbelieve. We have prepared for the transgressors a fire that will completely surround them. When they scream for help, they will be given a liquid like concentrated acid that scalds the face. What a miserable drink. What a miserable destiny. As for those who believe and lead a righteous life, we never fail to recompense those who work righteousness. They have deserved gardens of Eden wherein rivers flow. They will be adorned therein with bracelets of gold, and will wear clothes of green silk and velvet, and will rest on comfortable furnishings. What a wonderful reward! What a wonderful abode! Property as an idol. Cite for them the example of 2 men. We gave one of them 2 gardens of grapes, surrounded by date palms, and placed other crops between them. The footnote is, the Quran cites many examples of different gods that people worship beside God. They include children, 7:190, religious leaders and scholars, 9:31, property, 18:42, dead saints and prophets, 16:20-21, 35:14, and 46:5 and 6, and the ego, 25:43 and 45:23. Both gardens produced their crops on time and generously, for we caused a river to flow through them, to run through them. Once after harvesting, he boastfully told his friend, I am far more prosperous than you, and I command more respect from the people. When he entered his garden, he wronged his soul by saying, I do not think this will ever end. Moreover, I think this is it. I do not think that the hour, the hereafter, will ever come to pass. Even if I am returned to my Lord, I will be clever enough to possess an even better one over there. His friend said to him as he debated with him, Have you disbelieved in the one who created you from dust, then from a tiny drop, then perfected you into a man? As for me, God is my Lord, and I will never set up any other God besides my Lord. Important commandment. When you entered your garden, you should have said, This is what God has given me. Masha Allah. No one possesses power except God. La quwwata illa billah. You may see that I possess less money and less children than you. My Lord may grant me better than your garden. He may send a violent storm from the sky that wipes out your garden, leaving it completely barren, or its water may sink deeper out of your reach. Indeed, his crops were wiped out, and he ended up sorrowful, lamenting what he had spent on in vain, as his property lay barren. He finally said, I wish I never set up my property as a god besides my Lord. So I will stop reading there and go through the verses now, and God willing have some insightful comments. So verse 16, the seven sleepers of Ephesus. So the seven sleepers, they were, sorry, just give me 1 second. The seven sleepers of Ephesus, they were young Christians who were trying to worship God alone, which we can read in the footnote for 18 verse 16. And from the Nicene conferences, the Trinity doctrine had been announced or created. And so these young Christians were trying to follow the teachings of Jesus, which is an important point because the Trinity doctrine's got nothing to do with Jesus or what he was, what his message was to the world. So they were trying to follow the teachings of Jesus and worship God alone. And to avoid being persecuted, they decided to take refuge in a cave. And so God put them to sleep, I guess, in the cave. And they stayed in the cave for 300 years. And these sorts of stories are incredible, right? And, it's something you would expect to watch on Netflix, not read in the scripture. But because we have the mathematical miracle confirming that the Quran, the final testament, is the word of God and from God, then we're absolutely sure that these amazing stories in the Quran are the truth, and we don't have to have any doubts about, is this true? Did this really happen? How could they have stayed in the cave for 300 years? Or, to give another example, how could Jesus talk as soon as he was born? And we don't need to know exactly how these things work, but because of the mathematical miracle, we know this is the word of God, and we know we can believe in it 100%, 1,000%. and we don't need to question it. And this is important because prior to the mathematical miracle being revealed, anybody could have always said, but how do you know this is the word of God, and how do you know this is true about anything we mention from the Quran? But now, because of the mathematical miracle, we can say the mathematical miracle proves this is the truth, this is the word of God, and everything in here is true. And as submitters now, we should have absolutely no doubt about anything that we read in the Quran, no matter how fantastical it might sound. I just read a little bit. Oh, maybe I'll wait till the verse actually. I'll wait till a later verse. Yeah, so the 7 sleepers of Ephesus were Christian youths, and they took refuge in the cave and ended up staying in the cave for 300 years. And in verse 17, it talks about how the sun rose from the right-hand side and set on the left-hand side. So that suggests that the cave was facing north. And the heading for that verse is interesting. A guiding teacher is a prerequisite. And obviously the guiding teacher is God. Without God, then none of us would be guided, and we would all be astray. And God guides based on his will, and obviously God knows everything in the heavens and the earth and everything. God knows what's in our hearts, so he guides based on what's in our hearts. And he also sends astray based on what's in our hearts too. So that's why it doesn't really matter what people say with their mouths. It matters what's in their heart and what they truly believe. And somebody can say something with their mouth like, I believe this or I believe that, but that doesn't matter. And their actions and what they really believe is generally will be evident by their actions and what they say, maybe if they debate with you, for example. And it doesn't really matter whether they say, I believe this or I believe that, or I worship God alone, or I'm the best submitter, or anything like that. It's what's in their heart is what counts, and God will expose that. Excuse me. Verse 18. Verse 18 is interesting because it's talking about what you might have seen if you were in the cave with the Christians sleeping there. So it's interesting how it says we turn them to the right and to the left side, and their dog stretched his arms in their midst. And it says, you would think that they were awake when they were in fact asleep. And if you had seen them, you had been stricken with fear and fled. So with these amazing events that happen, which are detailed in the Quran, it's not, or at least I don't believe it's important to know exactly how these things work. And maybe we'll never know. For example, I don't know how Jesus could have spoke as soon as he was born. But we don't really need to know exactly how these things work, but God is giving us a little bit of insight here. The fact that if we were in the cave, we would have thought these ewes were awake, and we would have seen the dog, seemingly awake as well. But God preserved them in the cave for 300 years, including the food, actually. I'm not sure where that... There's a verse, I think, that talks about the food, I believe. And that was also preserved. And verse 19 is interesting. When we resurrected them, they asked each other, how long have we been here? And this is another example of how we can measure time in this dimension, in this earthly dimension, but when we move between dimensions, then we can't seem to measure time. So that's when, so verse 19 is the user are asking how long have they been in the cave, and they don't really know. And this is similar to when we die. From the point of death until the day of resurrection, it passes by like one night of sleep. And yet, obviously, we'll be dead for years and years and years. But in that dimension, in the afterlife, we can't obviously measure time. And this is similar. The Christians didn't know how long they had been in the cave for. And it was only when they ventured out to get food and they were discovered that they realized that they would have been in the cave 300 years. I don't know what they would have done when they realized that. The heart attack. It's just incredible. I don't really fully understand some of the details in verse 21, where it's talking about the people disputed among themselves regarding them. Some said, let us build a building around them. And those that prevailed, we will build a place of worship around them. I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe somebody can provide some comments once I've finished. In verse 22, it's mentioning how we don't really know the number of the Christian youths in the cave. Some said there were 3 and the dog was the 4th. Others said 5 and the dog was the 6th. Others said 7 and the dog was the 8th. And Rashad mentioned this in one of his videos, actually, one of his sermons. Basically, God is going out of his way to tell us that he's not telling us the number of youths in the cave. And basically, he's not telling us because that's not the important number related to this story or this event. And the important number is that they stayed in the cave for 300 years, increased by 9. Excuse me. So that's why in verse 22 he mentions, people guessed about the number, but God is going out of his way to tell us. He's not going to tell us the number. And a few people know the correct number, but basically the number of people that were in the cave is not important for this particular story. Verse 23 is and 24 is super important. Remembering God every chance we get. Again, Rashad in one of his sermons pointed out that our God is whatever we think about most often each day. So in order to ensure we're worshipping God alone, it is important to make sure that we have God on our minds the majority of the time. And our religious practices like the daily prayers goes a long way to helping us do that, because we have to remind ourselves to get up in the morning for the dawn prayer. We have to keep looking at our watches to see what time it is. Is it time to pray? Or we can obviously use Solomon's app, but it's still on our mind about is it time to pray now? When's it next time to pray? Where can I pray? I'm going to be traveling between now and then. When can I pray? If the prayer time is going to start when I'm traveling, for example. So all those little things help us to remember God. And verse 23 and 24 is telling us we need to remember God every chance we get. And 24 is important, and then it's telling us 23 and 24 that when we intend to do anything in the future, we must say God willing. And I know for some people that are not particularly religious, when they hear somebody saying God willing, maybe to them it can sound a bit fake, but it's very important that we say that, because in saying that we're acknowledging that God controls everything, and that's what God tells us in the Quran, that God controls everything in the heavens and the earth. From the biggest thing to the smallest thing, and to the tiniest, smallest subatomic particle, everything's controlled by God. So for anything to happen in the future, even if we intend to do it, we should be acknowledging that God controls everything, and it will only happen if God wills it. Hence why we say God willing. God willing, I'm getting better at that, but I certainly can improve on that. And like the heading says, remembering God every chance we get. There's, if we really think about it, there's lots and lots and lots of opportunities to remember God. So every time we have a chance to remember God is a blessing, and goes towards remembering God most of the time, and thus making God our God. Whereas people who don't remember God the majority of the time, their God might be their ego or their work. Work is probably a common God, I think, for a lot of people, or their family, or their spouse, or their property, or their business. But as submitters, we know that in the end, those things aren't going to help us. And while those things have a certain level of importance or significance, maybe is a better word, in this earthly life, they're not going to help us in the end. At the end of our life, when we're going to die, what will we be thinking of then? Will we be thinking of a property or our work? I don't think so. I think we'll be thinking of God and what's going to happen in the afterlife. Just give me 1 second again, please. Verse 25, the heading is 300 plus 9. And it says they stayed in their cave 300 years, increased by 9. 300 years increased by 9, that seems an unusual way to say 309 years. But like everything in the Quran, there's a reason why it was stated like that. And in the footnote, it says the difference between 300 solar years and 300 lunar years is 9 years. Thus, discovering the end of the world was predetermined by Almighty to take place in 1980 AH or 1980 AD or 1400 AH, 300 years before the end of the world. If I just go to Appendix 25, I'll read a little bit from Appendix 25. The unveiling of this information took place in the year 1400 AH, 309 years before the prophesied end of the world. Sorry, it's talking about 1709. Sorry. Maybe I think I read it from a little bit earlier in the appendix. It will not remain hidden. 20:15. Verse 15 of Surah 20 informs us that the end of the world will be revealed by God before the end of the world, and Surah 15 verse 87 gives time for that event. We have given you the 7 pairs in the Great Quran, 1587. The 7 pairs are the 14 Quranic initials. The total geometrical value of these profound pillars of the Quran's miracle pinpoints the year of the end of the world. It is noteworthy that verse 85 of Surah 15 states, the end of the world will surely come to pass. The next verse, 1586, tells us that God is the creator of this world, and of course he knows when it will end. The following verse, 1587, tells us when the world will end. And there's a table listing the 14 sets of Quranic initials and their associated geometrical value. So the first set is Q, then the next one is N, the third one is Sad, and then HM, and then YS, and so on and so on. And so there's 14 sets of Quranic initials, and if we add up the geometrical value of each of those 14 sets, it comes to a total of 1709. So as shown in Table 1, the geometrical values of the 7 pairs of the Quranic initials total 1709. According to 1587, the world will survive for 1709 lunar years from the time of this prophecy from the time this prophecy is stated in the Quran. This means that the world will end in 1710 AH. This number is a multiple of 19. 1710 equals 19 times 90. The unveiling of this information took place in the year 1400 AH, 309 years before the prophesied end of the world. 1709, which is the total geometrical value of the Quranic initials, sets of initials, minus 1400, which is the year AH, equals 309. So 1709 AH minus 1400 AH equals 309. The number 309 is a Quranic number from 1825, which is the verse I mentioned. They stayed in their cave 300 years, increased by 9, and is connected with the end of the world, 1821. This peculiar way of writing 309 in 1825, 300 years increased by 9, indicates that 309 are lunar years. The difference between 300 solar years and 300 lunar years is 9 years. The year of this discovery, 1400 AH, coincided with 1980 AD, and 1980 plus 300 solar years is 2280, or also a multiple of 19. 19 times 120. Thus, the world ends in 1710 AH, 19 times 90, which coincides with 2280 AD, 19 times 120. For the disbelievers who do not accept these powerful Quranic proofs, the end of the world will come suddenly. And there's several verses referenced here. So you can see more details about this in Appendix 25. It's interesting that this discovery was made in 1980, because 1980 was also the year that Rashad realized he was a messenger, although he didn't reveal he was a messenger until 8 years later. It's interesting in verse 26 that it says, "Say God is the best knower of how long they stayed there. He knows all the secrets in the heavens and the earth." So, as I mentioned before, God was emphasizing how long they stayed in the cave, and God knows all the secrets in the heavens and the earth, including when the earth will end. But it's significant that that's mentioned immediately after the verse mentioning 300 years increased by 9, because that was the secret, pinpointing the end of the world that we didn't know about until the messenger revealed that information in 1980. Also, there's some interesting things in verse 26. Also says, "By his grace you can see, and by his grace you can hear." There's other verses in the Quran that mention how we can never fathom all the blessings that God blesses us with. And you can't. If you really think about it, you can't fathom all the blessings that we have. And again here, God mentions that by his grace you can see, and by his grace you can hear. And sometimes I like to watch I don't even know if these programs are true. I assume they are, but they're like amazing medical stories on TV. And you hear about diseases that you never knew existed. And it's amazing, because when you watch that, you realize all the blessings that we have, because God willing, we're not affected by those diseases. We didn't even know they existed, and we didn't realize that there's particular diseases that we could be afflicted by, and it's just by God's grace that we're blessed not to be afflicted by those things. And by saying this, by His grace you can see, and by His grace you can hear. It's a bit like the other verse in the Quran that talks about how God controls everything, and how the birds fly in the sky and they're held up there by God. And this all comes back to everything. Absolutely everything in the heavens and the earth is controlled by God. And if it wasn't for God's grace, we wouldn't be able to see or hear. And some people can't. I had a good friend at university. He was technically he was partially sighted, but basically he was blind, and he had a guide dog. And you see the struggles that people that don't have aren't blessed with all the facilities of a normal person. and you see the struggles that they go through because of that. Verse 27 is important. It's reminding us that there's only one source of religion, and we should and it's God's words. And so for the Christians it will be the scriptures they received, and for the Jews it will be the scriptures they received, and for submitters it's the Quran, the final testament. And we should not follow anything apart from what God has revealed through His scriptures. And this is the major mistake that traditional Muslims make by following hadith, which supposedly is the teachings and sayings of Prophet Muhammad. But as we know, they're absolutely got no connection to Prophet Muhammad at all, and they were created generations after he died. And traditional Muslims follow those. I don't even know if they follow them per se, but they certainly follow rumors about what the hadiths say, and they just sort of follow each other without really knowing what they're following. But God is reminding us in verse 27 that we should recite His scripture, and we should only follow His scriptures and His words, and nothing should abrogate His word, change His words, or nullify His words. Verse 27, verse 28 is also interesting. They're all interesting verses, actually, praise God. But verse 28 is interesting. You shall force yourself to be with those who worship their Lord day and night, seeking Him alone. And I must admit, I went to the first Submitter conference in 2018, and then after that I started joining various online Quran study groups, and that really helps, particularly for me in a community of none. It really helps when there's no submitters around. It helps to be in contact with submitters, even though it's only online, on a regular basis. Because otherwise, when I'm at work or out and about, I'm not around submitters. So, being around submitters, even if only online or virtually, you can remind each other to stay on the right path, and remind each other about what God tells us in the Quran, and about what we should be doing and not doing. And all those things are important. And again, it's just another way to remember God from verse 23. And so in verse 28, God is telling us that, we should force ourselves to be with those who worship God day and night, seeking Him alone, and put priority on being with those people rather than people whose priority is this world, or who are oblivious to um, who are oblivious to the message, or who are oblivious to religion and God, I guess. Because for those who aren't religious, then this world is everything, and so obviously they pursue their own desires, and their priority is this world, which is quite amazing actually, because if they were to stop and think, those people who prioritize this world over the afterlife and over worshipping God and religion, I ever wonder, they stop and think about how this life pans out. Even if you live to a nice old age, say 80, for example, and you have a successful, awesome career and a big family and beautiful wife, lots of kids and grandkids and everything, ultimately at the end of the day, you're still going to die. And these people that supposedly aren't religious and maybe don't believe in the afterlife, then it seems extremely sad that you lived this life, you had an amazing, successful life in terms of this worldly dimension at least, and then you die and that's it. Isn't it a waste? Wouldn't that be a waste of 80 years? That you have all the success, you work hard, you try to, I don't know, yeah, you work hard. I was going to say something else, but it might not be correct. So, and then at the end of it, you die, and that's it. Isn't that a waste of 80 years of working hard? And so, really, if you think of it like that, then you realize that worshipping God and believing there's an afterlife, and believing that if we lead a righteous life and worship God alone, we can make it to heaven, then certainly that sounds like a lot more promising and rewarding than just dying. And that's it. Sorry, Solomon, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Thank you.
And another interesting verse. Sorry, I keep saying that, interesting verses. I shouldn't even apologize, but they are all interesting. Verse 29, absolute freedom of religion. This is important. This is probably important for submitters too, just to keep in mind, because this, I guess, can guide us in how best to behave and interact with others. Proclaim, this is the truth from your Lord. Then whoever wills, let him believe, and whoever wills, let him disbelieve. We have prepared for the transgressors a fire that will completely surround them. So I notice from Christians that I meet maybe through work and things, their perception of Islam or submission is it's a very harsh religion, and God and submission is a very harsh God, and whereas their God, Christian God, is a very kind God. And I don't know where that perception comes from. I guess it's based on what they see in the media, and maybe I don't know, history of the Middle East or something. I'm not sure, but I'm always surprised actually when they suggest that, because I've never ever thought that actually. And verse 29 is sort of reinforcing that point that God is not harsh. God is certainly firm and carrying out retribution, but He is also kind and most gracious and most merciful. It says that at least 114 times in the Quran. And this verse 29 reinforces that by saying, whoever wills, let him believe, and whoever wills, let him disbelieve. And I think this is important and is a good guide for how we should deal with and interact with other people, in the sense that we should advocate for example, if we're debating about a particular point, then we can advocate what God says in the Quran, and leave it at that. We don't need to attack the other side or the other party. We just need to present what God says about that particular point in the Quran, and then let the other party decide whether they wish to believe or not. And in the end, that's all we can do, because we can't force people to believe. Even if we dug a tunnel through the earth, they still might not believe. So, why waste your time if they're not going to believe? And God is saying here there's absolute freedom of religion. So we should just be presenting our points of view based on the Quran, and letting people decide one way or the other. And I guess verse 30 is reinforcing verse 29, that for those who do decide to believe and lead a righteous life, God will never fail to recompense those who work righteousness. And I've noticed actually in my life, I know Oprah Winfrey, I'm not a big fan of Oprah Winfrey or anything, but I know she used to say on the show that, she used to ask her guests, what do you know for sure? And I always used to think, I know you need to worship God alone. And another thing I know for sure is that this is loosely connected with verse 30, is that if you take the tiniest little step towards God in support of God, then God will never, ever, 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 ever fail to reward you. And it can be the tiniest little thing. And God will never fail to reward you for that little step towards God. Because in that little step, you're showing your support for God.
So I think we're past 45 minutes. So.
Oh, I talked that long. Okay. Okay, I'll wrap it up. I'll just say one last thing. Actually, that story at the end about the person with the property and the crops, and who was a bit arrogant and forgot to remember God. Actually, I can relate to that story. That sort of happened to me, but I won't go into the details in the part that's streamed on YouTube. But if you want to ask me about that afterwards, I will embarrassingly tell you my story. Okay, thank you very much. Open to everybody else's comments, please. Does anybody have any comments or any questions?
I think you put them to sleep.
Oh, wow. This is amazing, right, Solomon? This is incredible.
Your voice is very soothing, and
this is incredible because this is the time that I purposely didn't prepare. I'm not sure why, but I didn't. And then I ran out of time talking. Wow. Incredible. Praise God.
This surah is very, very dense as far as the content goes. I mean,
Yeah, you're right, actually, because when I looked at each verse, it was like, wow, that's important. That's important. It's not, there's nothing really light going on in that surah.
right. So many, yeah, definitely. So, okay, I do have some comment on this.
Please.
It's amazing. You started at 16, right?
Yes,
Verse
that's right.
16?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's so many things God is teaching us. So many things. So, I mean, where do we start? Started from one of the thing interested me that I notice it routinely basis, that how people pick up something that is not important at all, and you telling somebody a story, like you went to some place, suppose you went to Hawaii, and then you're trying to explain them how beautiful that place is, and people ask irrelevant questions, which is like you're scratching your head. That's not the point. Or like telling somebody about a movie, and they're asking you what kind of color or what kind of clothes they're wearing. I mean, this is irrelevant. Listen to the what you can learn from the story, and they're arguing how many people were there. Were there 3? Were 5? Were 7? And missing the cream of the story. That is that those young people, they're young and just. I mean, I wish to meet them someday. That their passion was for God was so strong that they disbanded their community where they grew up, their family, their relatives, their comfort zone. They were young. They could have just stayed there. They said, okay, we will decide later when we are strong enough. No, they ignore everything. Go ahead. And they left their community and seeking God's refuge into a cave. Just imagine that. They could have just, in their heart, they could have said, we're going to believe in God, but we're going to stay here until. But they left. And God's promises is so strong that God says, if you seek God, God will help you any situation in the middle of the war zone or something, and God gave them such a strong refuge. This is God's promise. And but they're asking, were there 5, were there 6, were there 7? I mean, this is so idiot is such a small word to use for this kind of situation. Like your head is screaming inside, idiot, why are you asking this question? Listen to the story, what a marvelous story that is. And what happens, and I'm gonna jump towards the end. Look what they're saying. Once they discover the present community, that was 300 years before, and then the present community that was at that time when they were discovered, and I don't know when they were gone, or but after 309 years, what happens? They say, oh, this is a blessed place, let's build a mosque here. I mean, what another, like, this is the human mentality. When we find a spiritual place, or we find something somewhere marvelous happen, like nowadays we have that, like in Saudi Arabia, like, there were the cave of prophet. They give such a high value to some place where something happened. I'm not saying that it's something that, yeah, there's a history on it, but let's build a mosque. Instead of learning from the story, that let's submit to God alone and put all of our trust to God. So we can be like those. We can learn from. It's like 10 students. They went to college and they worked so hard and become such a massive Google owners or whatever high. And then people are saying, oh, let's build a mosque at their university. Oh, because that's a blessed place. It's so funny.
Yeah, but that's an important point. Yeah, I mean,
you follow their footsteps. Why God is telling you all this? So that was my point, and it makes me upset. That I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. Build the mosque. Why you want to build a mosque on the spot? That you think that place was blessed? No, that place was. It was the people with their actions. That is important, and you follow their footsteps, so you can become somewhat like that. And I face with this kind of situation. Sometimes I'm trying to tell people about the submission of Quran, God alone, and they will ask you this weird question, and I'm like scratching my head. I mean, this is not important. This is absolutely not even the content of my community that I'm talking to you. This is, you're trying to throw away the main subject when I'm talking to you.
Yeah, I think maybe all submitters have faced that, and I find that actually with a lot of Westerners, that even they talk about religion, they always ask the superficial, irrelevant questions. Maybe that indicates their strength of faith and religion on God, but yeah, I like you. I find it a bit annoying actually that they ask these trivial questions. It's like, why don't you ask important things?
Right. Like your teacher comes to teach you chemistry in the morning, and then you think, okay, what did you have for breakfast?
Yeah.
It's not important at all. Let's talk about chemistry.
Yeah, it's like, Picasso coming to your house and you're asking him, why did you wear those shoes? And he's a great painter, he's like, you're asking about his shoes. Instead of asking what's the inspiration behind your greatest paintings or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was a good comment actually, because you sort of clarified a little bit about
Or
verse
telling
21.
somebody a joke. Instead of laughing, they're asking some stupid question.
Yeah, that's true.
Verse 21. Yeah, that's true. God is running everything. God made those sleepers as the end of the life, day of resurrection, and they were put to death for 300, I think, 9 years.
Mm.
And this is how God is giving us another example that God is going to put us to sleep, and then we'll be resurrected the same similar way or something.
Yeah, yeah, and we won't know how long we've been asleep for.
Yeah. See,
So what time?
one of the comment mentioned is that the time is relevant to the observer. If you can test it any time. Hello?
Yeah,
So,
sorry, keep going.
like you can speed up the time and slow the time anytime. You can test it anytime. You go put on some nice movie. 2 hours will pass.
Oh, you broke up, I think. I only heard 2 hours will pass. Not sure if you can hear me, Adam.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was switching the mic. I think there's something wrong with that.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me? Well,
You sound a lot clearer now.
oh, praise God. So time is relevant to the observer. You can watch such a good movie, and 2 hours will go by like that. And if you want to slow down the time, get on the treadmill and start running. Time is slowed down to a crazy, even like a second. Minute will be like you're watching the clock. It will be like the faster you run this treadmill, the slower the time is. It's amazing. And the fastest the time runs is when you're asleep. You fall asleep, and before you wake up, and 8 hours are gone. You don't even realize.
That's true. That's a good point.
And and 2 billion years ago, God is like, now science is discovering that our universe has been created like 2 billion or some years ago. And imagine that time from that point of time is past, and we didn't even realize. God put us up in death. God tells us that we put you on death, in the upper heaven. And now we resurrected here. That time lapses for us would be like a second. We would probably be putting to sleep and we're waking up here. And even if the day of judgment comes 2 billion or 10 billion years ago, God put us to death, we will be just dying and waking up right away. We won't even realize how much time. So for them, 300 years was gone. They didn't even realize. They thought they just slept for a day or a night. And the other story from Surah 2, where the guy was passing by a town and God put him to sleep for 100 years.
Yeah.
And he made the same statement.
Yeah.
So when we sleep, we can be asleep for 1 billion years, and we wake up, we're going to think that we just went to bed like 8 hours ago or something. Yeah, so a lot of time when you wake up in the middle of the night, you don't know what time is it. You look at the clock, that's when you realize how much time has passed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So what does that say? Does that say outside the earthly dimension that we can't track time,
That's probably, there's a lot of mystery in it. Probably in God's kingdom, time is running at a different speed. Somewhere it's running fast. Like God says in one place that this world is like a blink of an eye for God. I mean, how fast is a blink of an eye? Was like, and when you're high up in high heaven, when God is going to create the earth, God just maybe in a second, everything is done and over. But we are in this world, observing time. Like a fly can live for maybe 2 days, the whole life cycle. And a fly cycle, maybe time is running a lot faster than us. Yeah, if you were to ask a fly how long you live, in fly's lifetime, you'll be 60 years. So I had a good life. And for us, it'll be 2 days. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I remember my childhood yesterday.
Yeah, imagine that.
But yeah, I just find these stories are incredible, right? Like, and to think that these Christians stayed in the cave for 300 years and nobody ventured into the cave and discovered them either, you know? All this is amazing, right? That God controls everything.
Right,
It's only when they ventured out of the cave afterwards that they were discovered. No, nobody was
yes.
wandering along thinking, "Oh, look at this cave," and hey, there's these people sleeping in here. It didn't, you know, that didn't happen for 300 years. Wow.
Yeah, maybe some hikers went up in the cave and said, shh, 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 somebody's sleeping. Let's go back.
Can hear a dog barking.
Right, right. So it says you would have fled in verse number 18. Because the dog was like God put the dog in a way that you would have feared and run away.
Yeah, I can.
With
I can
terror.
only think maybe it's a bit like, you know, how they depict a zombie on TV. Not that they look like death, but you know how they sort of, the eyes are open, but they're like looking straight through you type thing. I
Right.
think maybe it's like that. I don't know. But,
Yeah.
incredible, eh? It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, God can stop one system and run other. Like the guy from the Surah number 2, for 100 years, his donkey the bones were like, the meat was all gone. And himself, he was full body. But donkey was dead. His food was not rotten. So God can stop one thing and run the other thing. I mean, God is in full control.
Yeah, maybe I'm getting confused with that story, because one story the food wasn't spoiled either.
Yeah, for him, from Surah 2 for 100 years. But for them, I think, because when they woke up, they said that let's go and get some food, send somebody to the city.
So maybe they didn't have any food. So, but it's amazing, right?
But,
That the food didn't spoil. It's like, wow.
but imagine when you're sleeping, your heart is still beating, your digestive system is still working, your cells are alive, and they still constantly need food, right?
Yeah.
So it's amazing how God put them to sleep in a way that it's only God knows how God did it. It's amazing. Was their system was completely shut down, or what happened to them?
Yeah. And that raises a couple of important points. Like, one point is maybe some of these things in the Quran that we read about, we don't really need to know exactly how they work. And in trying to figure out how they exactly work, I think we can cause trouble for ourselves.
Right.
So, you know, sometimes we don't need to know the details of how this happened. We just need to accept it because God tells us it happened.
Yes,
and,
true.
I had another point that I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think sometimes people can get caught up in the details, and it's a bit like the number of people in the cave. There's a detail that God is going out of his way to tell us is not important in this context.
Hey, I have a question.
Please.
Hello,
can you hear
all
us?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear?
Yeah, can hear you loud and clear. Praise God.
Yeah, it seems like a bit late, but whatever. I was going to ask about the Arabic term in the verses that you read, and the term is Ashabi Rakim. And which? What?
Verse 39. 39.
I don't know which verse actually. I'm not reading the Quran at the moment.
Okay, so Surah 18.
I'm on the road
39.
and I just.
Surah 18, verse.
The authorized translation translated I want you to read the authorized translation of the term Ashab Rakim, which means, as far as I can remember, the people of the number, and which is directly related to the code 19. I just wanted you to read the translation of it. Thanks.
Sorry, I don't quite understand what you're asking for. Obviously, I'm reading the English translation, right? Adam, did you understand what that person was asking?
Was it verse 39?
I thought he was asking about the Arabic that is in the English translation, whether he wanted me to, and there's some Arabic in verse 39. Rashad has put some Arabic in parentheses, but I'm not sure if that's what he was talking about.
Is it verse 39?
Yeah. Well, I thought he was talking about verse 39, but now I'm not sure.
Oh, let me check.
I don't know the verse. All I know is the term.
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit, but I think you're saying the term about the what was the phrase you used about the numbers there?
Is Ashabi.
Checking.
I know if I read verse 7, 8, and 9, which I didn't read in this session, but I'll just read those. The end of the world, verse number 7. Surah 18, verse number 7. We have adorned everything on earth in order to test them and thus distinguish those among them who work righteousness. Invariably, we will wipe out everything on it, leaving it completely barren. And then verse number 9 is the dwellers of the cave. Why else do you think we're telling you about the people of the cave and the numbers connect with them? They are among our wondrous signs. So maybe is that the verse you might be thinking of? Because that's talking about the numbers connected with them.
Yeah, I think maybe it says the verse is أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم وكانوا من آياتنا عجبا. That's the Arabic of it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Is that verse 9?
And this was 39, right?
No, verse 9.
Verse 9. Okay, sorry. All right.
Thanks for that, Adam.
Actually, the reason that I focused on this term is there was an atheist conference about it in Turkey, and the professor was saying that the Rakim, the word Rakim is actually from the Old Testament, and he said Muhammad actually copied the Old Testament by taking the word Rakim, which actually has no meaning, and he was like denying the code 19. Also, he ridiculed the code 19 too on the conference. He showed the document from the old Aramaic writing, which was the so-called original Torah, and he kind of proved in his own concepts. He thought that he proved that Quran is actually a man-made book, and he used the Rakim. But the conference is in Turkish, so I cannot really send you the video. But it was interesting.
Yeah. And it's an atheist conference.
Yeah, exactly. I watched it on YouTube. I mean, the professor is a very interesting person. An Armenian guy. He's like super clever and like has high IQ, everything. And I mean, he has some good opinions sometimes, and I'm following him. But whatever. Well, that's it.
Oh, wow.
Well, if he's an atheist, I don't think his IQ is any good.
Assalamu Alaykum.
Walaikum salam.
Just a quick comment about that. It is very easy, that these people suddenly emerge now with all this knowledge, suddenly, after like 30 years, after Rashad has already, established, revealed, when God revealed through Rashad the miracle and all that stuff, then suddenly you see all these people popping up, claiming this and that and whatever. It's easy afterwards. The question is, why didn't they come forward before?
Yeah.
They had 1,400 years to do so. So who cares what they say?
I don't know if you guys know the Arabic. I mean, I know a little bit of Arabic. So the Rakim is actually from the same root with Rakam, and Rakam means number. So it's very obvious what it means actually, but the denier wants to deny, so he finds reasons.
Yeah. In one of Rashad's videos, he actually, I think he laid out a challenge to the disbelievers to, find another number or another, mathematical miracle based on another number or something. And they haven't found anything. So and then you can go on YouTube and watch traditional Muslims trying to claim about the number 19 and yet rubbishing Rashad at the same time. So yeah, these people should have come out before Rashad came out with his revelation, and then they might have had some credibility.
And I don't know why they would say that it's from the the New Testament or Old Testament, when this word Warakim is clearly Rakam, which is he's right about number. We also use the Rakam as a currency in Urdu.
Oh, okay.
So the word says hasibta anna ashab al-kahfi, like people of the cave, Warakim, wow is for and their numbers. Kanu min ayatina ajaba is that they're the wonders of, it's a huge miracle. That is the reason, and it has nothing to do with the Old Testament or New Testament. I wonder if they would use that.
Actually, the professor showed a document, and the writing was almost the same. I mean, the Aramaic, I think, the Aramaic writing and the Arabic writing of Rakim were almost the same, and I don't remember the details of the arguments very well. But that's the. I mean, I watched it like 2 years ago or something, maybe more. So I just remember those.
But it wouldn't make sense to be from. Did you say from the Torah or from the Bible?
From the Old Testament, so I think Torah and the Old Testament are the same things, right?
Right.
Yeah, but it wouldn't make sense, right? Because this story is about
Yeah,
the
Christians.
youths trying to escape from the neo-Christian doctrine. So this had to happen after the Bible has come. So it doesn't make sense
No.
to find the details in the earlier scripture.
Walaikum salam.
Yeah, but if like particular words like rakam or rakim, they think are similar to Old Testament or anything, that can happen because they're all ancient scriptures. And when Quran was being revealed to Prophet Muhammad, people did say even at that time, tales from the past. So certain things or realities are repeated in the Quran, history, and certain words could have been very similar. So there's no wonder if they still say it is copied, because if Quran tells us that people said that to Prophet Muhammad, he copied it from the previous scriptures, or it's nothing original, and then
Yeah,
he's telling us the previous stories. So
yeah. And
I want,
Muhammad,
yeah.
yeah, and Muhammad was not a like a expert of Aramaic. He was an Arabic speaker, and also, like Allah is the same word for Aramaic. For Allah, God, Aramaic and Arabic is the same word Allah. So that doesn't. But they have a lot of common words. So it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, also, but his argument was a little bit more complex, and he was saying that maybe I represented the idea wrongly in this talk, but he said that actually Muhammad made a mistake when writing it, and the words weren't exactly the same when you write them down. And in Arabic, he made a mistake, and that's why he wrote Rakim. And as I said, I don't remember the details, but it was a little bit more complex than saying that he took the same word from the Old Testament. It was a little bit more complex, but I just don't remember the exact argument. I just wanted to say,
yeah. In a nutshell, he's not a very intelligent person, obviously, to come to that conclusion. So, that's all.
Yeah, Arabic, Aramaic, Hebrew, it's all Semitic languages. So you have similarities. If you, for example, samak, fish, in Arabic, samak, you have the same word in Phoenician, which is the difference between Arabic and Phoenician is a few thousand years.
Yeah.
Yet you still have the same word. Even Adam, Bani Adam, in Phoenician, which is thousands of years older than Arabic, is still spelled the same, Bani Adam, in the Semitic language. So of course you have similarities. And this word, wal rakim, rakimi, the root word is ra, kaf, mim, and you have two other words in the Quran that are similar, that says markumun, markumun, which means written, according to this website at least. But it means markum, it's basically numbers that are written. So it's referring to the numbers written. There's a specific, there's something about numbers in the Quran that is related to what is written.
Yeah, and
that's why Rashad
it's
translated as it is.
Yeah, I think it's a very I think it's a very standard word in Arabic.
Yeah.
The root word, yeah.
But the use of
have
it,
the
how
same,
it's
yeah,
bent, being used, is very
yeah,
unique. That's all.
yeah.
Because, yeah.
Also in
It talks
Turkish,
about numbers attached to them, and the number, because number has been used in this. It is so much. The focus is on numbers here, because the numbers determine the end of the world, according to Quran's mathematical code. So it is the key word here, because the numbers that how solar and lunar, the difference between solar and lunar years, according to the Quran's mathematical code, reveal the end of the world. And I'm gonna read this verse here. Where did that go? Yeah. Like Solomon just mentioned, the Prophet Muhammad's tongue or language was not Amharic, it was pure Arabic. So Surah 16, verse 62, they ascribe to God. No, hold on. It's the subtitle says Surah 16, verse 103. The Quran is not copied from the Bible. 103. We are fully aware that they say a human being is teaching him. The tongue of the source they hint at is non-Arabic, and this is a perfect Arabic tongue. So this question, about him copying certain words or whatever people thought were not similar to Arabic even. So yeah.
It's basically like this. Oh, Prophet Muhammad used the name Ibrahim. Oh, he's copying. Who used the name Adam? Oh, he's copying. That's how silly it is.
the argument was more like he was, for example, in the assume that in the Old Testament there is a character named Miriam, and for example, let's assume that Muhammad wrote Mariam instead of Miriam, and he did a mistake when copying, and that's a proof in their terms.
Yeah, I mean, either way, we know his argument is baseless because we have physical, tangible, mathematical proof that, every word in this book is revealed by God because of the, numerical composition of the Quran, right? So, I mean, but like you said, he was even making fun of that. So, this person is obviously misguided disbeliever who's completely blocked by God. So, his argument is
Exactly.
nullified. Yeah.
They're just trying to find excuses.
And this guy is considered as an expert in Arabic, and once he went to prison, and in prison he willingly taught people how to read and pronounce the Quranic verse, and he gave Quran lessons in the prison as an atheist. It's crazy.
I mean, there's many experts in the Quran, and they know exactly the words and everything. But if they don't believe in the miracle and all the other stuff, then God blocks them. They only have access to this amount of information.
Also, I wanted to add that rakam, the word rakam, is the same word in Turkish too. It's for number, rakam. There is another word for it too, like sayı, you say, but rakam is also used very commonly. So I just wanted to add this. And also, I just wanted to talk because I listened for 2 hours in the bus and just wanted to talk. That's all.
So it's good to hear from you. You should talk more often, God willing.
Yes, it's a common word, basically.
I mean, anyone should pick up. This is because you have only one life to live, and this is the critical issue: whether is this a word of God or is this word of not a word of God? And you would pick up, and you have a miracle that's explained, and you shall at least do yourself a favor to read it. Remember when the Moses, when he went to Pharaoh, Pharaoh could have just kicked him out. Nonsense. I don't want to talk to you. Don't waste my time. But you have to give the credit to Pharaoh that he invited all the setup and the tournament, and he sent his people to bring all those magicians. He wanted to give him the chance to prove your miracle. I mean, how many times it's like very sad. You tell people a miracle, they just heedlessly turn away. Nonsense. In that sense, I think Pharaoh gets more credit for at least testing out the miracle, even though he rejected, but at least he gave a chance for Moses to explain his case. And one should read the Quran, just like at least examine the miracle. You open the book and it says, suppose the easiest ones, number of surahs, 114 is multiple of 19, the Surah Fatiha, and many the simple ones that you don't even have to go like chapter 2 and read Alif Lam Mim and count them. Requires a lot of time. Or you can pick up the easy one where the Q appears in 2 different surahs and count the number of Qs. And there, both at each of the surahs are 57 precisely, even though one surah is almost a double or a lot longer than the other one, but precisely 57. Each 57 is multiple of 19, and combined together is 114. Miracle upon miracle. I mean, when you play like a dice with the 6 sides on it, every time you throw it, you get a 1 in a 6 chance of getting a 6. But get a dice with 19 sides. What is the chance of getting 19? It's very hard. You can throw it maybe 100 times, maybe you might not even get a 19. So it's like first step is the person should realize that it is there. There is a phenomena in the Quran. There's a number of 19. It is present, and that's hard to. You have to be blind to walk away from it because it is there. It's very massive. It's every word and letter is so calculated, and probably there's much more that in there we don't even know yet, but maybe. So once you see, there is a miracle, and then the second step comes in that you realize, is it possible to happen by chance? And that's the second question one should ask themselves, that it is impossible. 38, I think, initial surahs, what is the chance of rolling a dice on each one of them and getting a number 19? Impossible. That is just one part of the miracle. What's the chance of getting a Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim with 19? How many times there's impossible to get a chance. So then the second step is it chance by chance? No, somebody has put it in there. And then the third question comes in, can it be done? Okay, and this is the question one should ask, that 1400 years ago, where there was no computer, somebody who didn't even know had the knowledge. Impossible to create some miracle. Can you do it? And then if you challenge it, go produce something like that or something like that. So if you go step by step and when you realize there's a miracle and you reject the word of God, at least give a chance, just like Pharaoh did. At least give a chance to read it and examine it yourself. I think that's a very important thing to understand.
Yeah, I just want to say about Pharaoh that, I don't give him any credit there because his intention was to expose Moses. The idea was that he's going to gather everyone in a big, group, and so everybody's going to see that Moses is going to be embarrassed, and the magicians will prevail, and he's going to win. So that was his whole plan, but obviously it backfired on him.
Yeah, I would agree with that, actually. Yeah.
Right. I understand. At least people can do that to examine the miracle of 19. So even make a joke about us. At least come and examine it. But people don't even want to examine it.
Yeah, call experts.
That's true.
They should
call your experts.
Let's call experts, because he called experts. He said,
right.
Okay, if this is magic, let's call magicians, because he thought it was magic. He's another trick. So he called all the experts. People don't even do that. You know, they're not even a little bit curious about it. Come on. Pharaoh was very curious about it. He even asked them to build a tower so he can go and see Moses, God. He actually, you know, wanted to prove everything, whether it's wrong, to prove it wrong or prove it right. You know, he
Yeah, I
had
mean, actually,
that much sense more than
Well,
these people.
yeah,
I don't think he's
that,
trying to prove it right, but
yeah, he
but
wasn't trying to prove it
Whatever.
right because that verse does say, it said, he says, so I may look at the God of Moses, and then it says, thus
Yeah.
his scheming was wicked, So, and
Yeah.
then even when he saw the proof, like he said it was magic, but it, I feel that he didn't want to admit it because Moses tells him that you know full well that no one can manifest it except God.
Mm.
Yes.
So same thing. These people are wicked too, but they don't want to even
Right.
call the
Right.
expert. They don't even care even this much.
yeah, we
They
we
think
understand the
obviously they
point
think
being
they're
made.
the experts.
Maybe they're not experts at all. For
Yeah,
example,
because they're not experts at all. Because they don't want to even. They never gave Quran any thought.
Maybe they
You know,
should
those
get.
who even inherited the scripture, they they haven't given it any thought at all. They just hearsay,
Yeah,
living on
exactly.
hearsay. That's all.
Exactly. They just listen to everybody else without any investigation of their own.
yeah,
Get
for
them call their
example,
mathematicians.
you know who Richard Dawkins is, the biochemist or whatever he is. He wrote the books against God. Anyways, there's a video of him joking about the Quran, where
Yeah,
it
well,
where it says that we built the mountains as pegs, basically, to make sure the land doesn't roll under your feet. Basically, it was a bad translation by some Muslim or whatever. And this Dawkins guy, he's a scientist, highly respected, and he laughed at the idea of mountains being pegs. And then you know they are slowly discovering now that mountains are actually pegs. So it just shows how the experts are not actually experts. Maybe he's an expert at what he does, sitting in a lab and studying the cell. That's it. That's what he's an expert at.
mm.
But it doesn't mean that he's an expert at everything else. So I think that's what gets people, what gets to their heads. They might be an expert on one thing, and then they assume they know everything else.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what feeds their ego, their arrogance. That's why they are reluctant to study the Quran or this miracle. They think they already know.
In different eras, people thought different so-called facts about the world, but in the coming eras refuted their claims with another proofs. So that's the thing happened with Dawkins.
Yeah, and I don't think he admitted his mistake even when he afterwards.
By the way, I read his book, The God Delusion,
Yeah,
and I think it was one of the worst books written by atheists to support the atheist claim. It was very basic,
he,
and I just don't understand why it's very popular. Maybe because its name is very shiny. Maybe that's why.
yeah, he does bring up like some good arguments, but those arguments were built from false pretenses, like false information. So he's basically building arguments from wrong information, and he's assuming so much. He doesn't have access to the truth. So how can he build proper arguments? He can't. So he can just build arguments from history. Like he reads about people doing crazy things, and he builds an argument from that and assumes that's the truth, and that's where his arguments come from. You could also say that his arguments are based on fiction. They are not based on truth, but it resonates a lot with people who haven't studied the religion or any religion, who don't understand religion or God. So it resonates a lot with people who are atheists or agnostic and stuff like that. That kind of people. For example, let's say I'm lazy. I don't want to study the religion or God. I don't want to figure things out on myself, on my own. Then this guy writes a book, and I decide to read it instead. And then I go buy it. I follow it. And I feel better about myself. Because it validates it answers my questions. Like my curiosity, maybe, I don't know. Or my suspicions. It answers my suspicions and how do you say? Prejudices. And that's all that book is good for. To make atheists and disbelievers feel better about their disbelief, basically. And it's, I don't know, it's their own their loss, basically. It's their loss. But yeah, that's how the human works. We try to find whatever validates what we already want to believe. That's how most people are. There are very few people who are willing to like put aside or like destroy their ego, their opinions, and just follow the truth. Very few people have that capability. You will hear people say they have it, like a lot of scientists. They claim, "Oh, I'm a scientist. I study the facts." And well, okay, then why don't you study the Quran? And then they get exposed. That's how they get exposed. People who act smart, but they don't behave. They say they are smart, but they don't behave, and they don't act in a way that reflects an intelligent person. And God doesn't. God tells us in the Quran the proper way of doing things. God tells us use your own brain. Don't believe rumors. Study the facts. And all kinds of things. Be patient. Meditate. Like all kinds of stuff. It makes you wonder. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, Masha Allah, I mean, that was a good point. It's amazing how, people, they want to mislead other people and they can pull out of context something that is any way they want to use. Like, for example, if you read the Surah Joseph, and you just read to somebody when he got his brother in trouble, Joseph, he put the cup in his brother's bag. And he just tell that part of the story, what people would think that, oh, Joseph is so bad. He had all that power. His brothers came for him for food, and he got them in trouble. But if you're not telling, so out of context, you pull something out, it's going to have serious consequences. And your intentions, God sees your intention. And if you're intentionally doing something, pulling something out, then there's a price to pay. Whole Quran, nothing but the Quran and absolute the Quran. Then you show something. And I met somebody, he was mocking and baffling about some religious pupil. He said they were bad and this and that. I said they were gone long time ago. You don't know them. Maybe they were good, maybe they were not good. But you are saying some real bad things about those people without any knowledge. What if they were right? Like people, they make mockery of Quran and God. And do they have absolute certainty? God says, bring your truth, bring your proof if you are truthful. People say this Quran is made by Muhammad. Okay, if you do that, bring the Quran. There's several places God says, God even says, bring a surah like that if you are truthful. And certainly they cannot. God says, get all the humans together and jinns band together. They can never produce anything like this. This is a challenge from God. If you're really challenging God, and instead of sitting in a community, produce something like that, which can be examined by other people. But this is God's challenge. And people bring out small portion, like a word, Rakim, and this and that, try to divert people from the truth. But God has all the truth. And anybody who follows, anybody who schemes and follows them, they will be responsible for their schemes. Anybody follow them, they will be asked. I have given you eyes, ears, and brains. Eyes, ears, and brains, and you're responsible for using them. So everybody will be responsible. MashaAllah.
Yeah, and I think if somebody's an atheist and you know they're an atheist, like you shouldn't like want to listen to their arguments or be like in any way like impressed by them, because you know that they will just, their duty is to put doubts in you, like this one, so they will just do that, so I wouldn't even like listen to people like that, and just like go and look elsewhere for knowledge and curiosity, just go and read about creation and things like that.
Yeah, also, not all atheists are atheists. Most of them are anti-theists, which is a big difference. An atheist is just a person who doesn't believe in God, but that's a very rare person to find. I mean, okay, not really, but but on a like a scientific level, like an intelligent level, like where they are, where they don't believe in God because there is no proof. That's it. If you show them the proof, they will believe. It's like very rare to find such people. But anti-theists, those are plenty, and that's what most atheists are. They are anti-theists. For example, I had a long time ago a friend, an atheist friend, and he said something bad about God. And I told him, well, if you're an atheist, then you should also be able to say something good about God. But he got mad at me and started to say bad things about God even more. Which proves that he isn't an atheist. He's just a wicked disbeliever who hates God. He said he has an agenda. He had an agenda. He had hatred for God. It was not a matter of facts or evidence or whatever. It was just a very evil individual who hated God. That's it. And I think I think they are struggling with it, like these different beliefs in atheism. You have them; they fight among each other what it means to be atheist. So this anti-theist is a new term among them.
Yeah, also, I think as long as you have, nonsense in the religion, there's a good market for, atheism, because you see all this nonsense that these people practice in their religion, like one of them being circumcision, right? And so you see then, many people who are against circumcision, they become atheists because they say, well, what kind of God would, order as a thing first to defame God, and then use that to basically, bring people into, atheism. So that's why it's
Yeah,
important to separate, nonsense from the religion,
exactly.
because all it does is repels people and, pushes them away from the religion.
I actually think it has some social reasons too. For example, when you're against circumcision, but you still believe in God and scriptures and everything, such people are not very high in the population. I mean, if for the whole world. So when you want to socialize and find like-minded people, you're getting together with anti-theists or militant atheists, and that's also another trick of Satan. It makes you to fear from loneliness.
So it makes you feel loneliness.
I said Satan makes you fear from loneliness, because when you're against circumcision but you still believe in the Quran, I mean, most people who claims that are believing in the Quran are pro-circumcisionists. So when you're against circumcision, I mean, it's like 1%, even less than 1% of believers. So you're lonely actually in that
Yeah,
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah. Meaning, I hear you. What you're saying is that because the majority is on one side, so they're afraid that who's gonna believe they're right, you know.
yeah,
So they will be just compromising on their belief and say, okay, let's go with the crowd, and we can't be wrong, you know. That's the thing, because it is such small numbers of people who would actually thoroughly believe that this cannot be from God. Because a lot of people say, well, it's not in the Quran, let's not discuss it. It's open for everybody's interpretation. Like, how could it be open for interpretation? Its subject is closed. If it's not in Quran, it's not from God. When it's not from God and you're practicing it, thinking it can be from God, then it is satanic, basically. So the certainty, most people in this world would not be certain about many things. You know, they will believe in Quran alone and God alone, but they will leave so many things open-ended that no, we don't want to be certain one way or the other. They're afraid, you know, because certainty will make them very isolated, you know. So the fear of isolation from mainstream or all the majority, because a lot of people, God even tells us in the Quran that for a lot of people religion is a social function. Religious gatherings are social function. So isolation from those social functions, you're afraid of that. People don't want to annoy their community. Oh, well, you know, okay.
yeah. There could also be cases where they don't have anywhere else to go. Maybe they will be thrown out on the street if they speak up, or other consequences.
I think I couldn't make my point clearly. What I meant was the transition between being a believer to having a non-religious views like atheism or similar views like agnosticism. I think for some people the process is like this: you're against injustices and nonsense in the religion that you're having at the moment, and then you're like picking some parts of that religion and denying some parts of that religion. For example, if you're a Sunni and you hate circumcision and it feels bad for you to believe it, you're stopping to believe it, but everyone around you is Sunni, so you're hanging out with atheists because they are more like-minded with you, so you're getting you're becoming like them because you're making them your friends, your close friends. And I think that's I mean, from experiences and from my observations, that's a very common reason of people who are losing their beliefs.
Because if they hang out with religious people, then like Sunnis, then those Sunnis will try to convince them of circumcision and like every day, maybe, I don't know, argue with them. But then they lean towards the atheists because the atheists just don't care. They're more, they don't care. But the issue is that the atheists will try to make you leave your religion completely, or make you disbelieve in God completely.
Yeah, actually,
so
if you
it's
look
two
at
bad choices.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. It was just.
Yeah, I was gonna say, also if you look at the video for, I think, the in defense of the Bible, he talks about how there's all this nonsense in the Bible, and because of this nonsense that these people find out, many people become disillusioned with the Bible and turn to atheism, right? So actually, the Messenger of the Covenant actually made that point as well.
Yeah, that's true. I think you've, like, maybe this is a bold statement, but if everyone, no, it's not bold, it's actually just realistic. If every person read the Quran and studied Rashad Khalifa and the mathematical miracle, they would, if they are sincere, then they would all believe. They would all believe in God and all that stuff.
I don't think so.
Well, he said if they're all sincere.
Yeah, I had to put that
if
in.
you're sincere. If they're not sincere, then of course they're not sincere, most of them, right? But if they were, everybody would be a believer if they were all sincere. I mean, if they were sincere, they wouldn't even need to see the miracle. They would be believers.
Yeah. The thing is, the people who among those who call so-called submitters, who claim circumcision is part of the religion, you show them a basic principle that there shall be no compulsion in religion. You can't force religion on someone. So when you circumcise a child, then you are by definition forcing your religion on the child.
Yeah.
Very straightforward, very logical, but they don't have the sincerity to admit it. Like, it's so basic. It's like 1 + 1 = 2. Don't be stupid. 1 + 1 = 2. but they are so insincere, and you can see it. It's just they expose themselves. It's devastating. They devastate themselves. It's crazy.
Yeah,
That's a
one of the reasons.
straightforward.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons a lot of them become locked in disbelief, where they're unable to see anything, is like because they refuse to accept the completeness of the Quran. God says in the Quran, when people refuse to accept the completeness of the Quran, it, they get trapped. When people take another source besides the Quran, they're trapped. So these people are trapped. And when you get trapped by Satan for your own actions, nobody will help you. God will not help you. You will be like shielded, right? It's a divine shield. Like it's the same thing. Like for the disbelievers, that when you show them the miracle, or the traditional Muslims, they can't see it, even though it's incredible and amazing, right? And you think they'll become believers. So these people, they go in the same category after that, and so they become blocked just like those people, just exactly like those people. They become blocked, and they can't get out of it. It's like they're trapped.
I have a theory for how these people found themselves in, or were attracted to submission, like why they tried to be submitters. And I think it's part of their rebellion, maybe against their parents, society,
Right.
maybe against maybe they hate like Muslims or Arabs, so they decided to convert to a religion that Muslims hate. The traditionalist. I don't know. That's what I feel. That people picked submission because it represented rebellion in their eyes. In their eyes, it represents rebellion. It's the new thing. It's the new thing. So they decided to call themselves this religion, this new thing. I don't know. Maybe it's part of their ego to be part of this new. Like, I don't know how to explain it.
Right.
For example, I've seen some people whose parents have been Muslim, and they talked with me about the religion, and they find it interesting, and they started to consider themselves submitters and whatever. But actions speak louder than words. After time, you see that they're only doing it to rebel against their parents, because they don't do the salat, they don't care about the salat, the fasting, they don't care about anything. They just care about calling themselves something that others find that others become angry about.
Yeah. Yeah, plus
Like a
some people want to be
rebellion.
different.
Yeah,
They just
be different. Because I don't think you can be sincere and fail. If you're sincere, you're sincere. That's your personality. So the question is, how did these people? The reason why they are insincere right now is because they have always been insincere. That's what I believe. because sincerity is a personality trait.
They're just too lazy to be sincere because
Yeah, that could be
you
it
have
as
to show
well.
some effort. You have to take risks.
Actually, you know what? There's a verse that reminds me of. It's in these people, you know, because they slide back right after becoming submitters. So if you see Surah 25 in Surah 47, it says, "Surely those who slide back after the guidance has been manifested to them, the devil has enticed them and led them on. This is because they said to those who hated what God has sent down, we will obey you in certain matters. God fully knows their secret conspiracies." And so they decided to obey them in certain matters, you know.
So that's the one. That's it.
And this actually reminds me the historicist or historicist, I'm not sure the word, interpretation of Islam. Because before I became a submitter and I believed in the Code 19 and everything, I was very interested in the historicist interpretation, which has roots in Fazlur Rahman Malik. He was an academician in Chicago, and some other scholars. They're like literally taking some verses from the Quran, and they're saying that those verses are universal. You have to apply them in all the time until the end of the world. But they're also picking some verses which takes maybe 40% of the Quran, and they are saying that those are outdated. You cannot apply them, and God does not want you to apply them. So they are actually useless. They are just historic documents that we have. So let's, even one of them even suggested to write another religious scripture only with universal principles from the Quran, not the rules and everything, just the principles like don't start war and like don't kill people. And like he said that we can write those and it will be like a small book and we can apply it. And those guys are like have some audiences and some believers that are actually more than submitters in the world. So I was very interested in those discussions because I was trying to figure out what to do. I mean, this verse is also describing them in my mind. I mean, because I read about them and I met some of them. I think it fits in them.
So what happens if we remove all those verses and there is a war?
Actually, most of them were talking about European law, and like even for war, we can take the European law and modify it a little bit, then apply it because it's modern. So they were like modernist historicists, and yeah.
Yeah, also, another that comes to my mind is Surah 4, verse 60. It says, "Believers are hypocrites. It says, have you noted those who claim that they believe in what was revealed to you and what was revealed before you, then uphold the unjust laws of their idols? They were commanded to reject such laws. Indeed, it is the devil's wish to lead them astray. When they're told, come to what God has revealed and to the messenger, you see the hypocrites shunning you completely." Well, but I think as far as the reasoning goes, I think the previous verse was probably maybe closer. Yeah. Nevertheless, I mean, when you claim to be a submitter, you have to be tested, and God has to see whether you're giving lip service or you're actually going to uphold the Quran alone. When people become submitters, they say, yes, we'll uphold the Quran alone, we'll follow God alone, we'll obey the messenger, and then they're put to the test to these things to see if they really follow through. But obviously, some of them fail by doing that, right? Like that's why it says the hypocrites drop out with these schemes, right? Um, Actually, and it's funny that these people will use this verse against the believers, but the verse I'm talking about is this one. Uh, the hypocrites drop out in Surah 22. So, so if you actually, oops, I went to the previous page. Yeah, so Surah 22, it says, we did not send before you any messenger nor a prophet without having the devil interfere uh, in his wishes. God then nullifies what the devil has done. God perfects his revelations. God is omniscient, most wise. The hypocrites drop out. We thus set up the devil's scheme as a test for those who harbor doubts in their hearts. Uh, who harbor doubts in their hearts, and those whose hearts are hardened. The wicked must remain with the opposition. So I think it's like a test that these people are put through these distortions, and those people who are not sincere will naturally fall for it and expose their true convictions.
I do follow lots of anti-circumcision campaigns on internet, but I didn't watch any circumcision videos because it was too brutal to watch for me. But yesterday I was watching a documentary called The Red Pill, and it was about anti-feminism, and some men rights movements were anti-circumcisionists too. So I accidentally watched a video, and now I cannot forget about it. It was very brutal, and I just cannot believe how such a brutal act became a norm in some parts of the
Exactly.
world. And also, it's unbelievable to see that it's very common in US. Maybe because of the Jewish power there, maybe.
Yeah, knowing how brutal it is, yeah, because of that, and because of the money that's behind it. America is all about making money. But the thing is, um, like knowing how brutal it is for people to believe that God would, command such a thing to Abraham, to do it to himself, to do it to, his slaves and his children, especially during those times, also when they didn't have any medical facilities or anything like that. I mean, it's a brutal, brutal thing. And to think that, and God says in the Quran that God never advocates sin. So to have these evil thoughts about God, I mean, this is blasphemous. To think that God would order, Abraham or anybody for that matter, to do it to their offsprings. That in itself shows that these people don't believe in God.
Yeah, it's the same type of blasphemy with the people who claim that Abraham got an order to kill his son.
Yes.
Yeah. How can someone think that God would order someone to kill their own son? That makes no sense. That's, I mean, like if I'm innocent and I'm being accused of something, a crime, then that's hurtful. if it's injustice, but it's also hurtful. So how can you imagine doing it to God, the most innocent? God is pure, innocent of everything. Yet these people are so willing to claim that God commands them to circumcise their own children. And that's just the brutal part about it. It breaks so many other commandments, like the one we discussed earlier, religious freedom. So not only are they claiming that God commands them to harm someone innocent, to take away that child's blessing, what God blessed them with, like when they grow up, they won't be able to enjoy the blessing of intercourse fully. So they take away that child's ability to enjoy God's blessings, but they also are claiming that God contradicts himself. So there are many issues with claiming that circumcision is from God. A very big issue.
Yeah, also, I think we've all read that, right? In Appendix 9, it says, such an evil, like when it says about Abraham killing his son in Appendix 9, it says, God the most merciful he never violates his own law. 7:28 is any person who believes that the most gracious ordered Abraham to kill his son cannot possibly make it to God's heaven. Such evil thought about God is gross, blasphemous. Nowhere in the Quran do we see that God ordered Abraham to kill his son. On the contrary, God intervened to save Abraham and Ishmael from Satan's plot, and he told Abraham, "You believe the dream." So undoubtedly, it was a dream inspired by Satan. God's irrevocable law is God never advocates sin. 7:28, right? So, yeah, I mean, if it's a merciful God. Obviously, you know, they're saying that God is not merciful by doing that.
Yeah, where's the mercy towards the child? There is no mercy.
Yeah. I mean, if because he would make the child come born circumcised. Why bring him this way and then put him to trauma, right?
Yeah, and I made a post on Facebook about the blood loss during circumcision.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Which equals to
1/4 of, or 2/3,
like 4 blood donations in one sitting.
Right. Yeah.
So circumcision
the
blood
loss.
loss.
A good point. Yeah. How much blood does a child have? His small amount of blood.
Yeah, they compared the blood loss during circumcision for a child is equal to an adult who does 4 blood donations in one sitting on the same day. And if you do one blood donation, you become, lightheaded.
Yeah.
And you have to eat special food. You have to recover.
Yeah.
So can you imagine 4 times that amount? And they didn't comment. They were like ignoring my post completely.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and the only comment you got for one person was like, oh, this is, you used a bad word, you know? Yeah,
Like turning a blind eye to the truth.
yeah,
So insincere, and I don't know.
yeah.
That's not the behavior of a submitter or believer.
I mean, the sad part is that you remember, Solomon, you talking to me about a month ago or something,
Uh-huh.
and my statement was that if it's not in the Quran, if God does not prohibit anything, like suppose you come and tell me, oh God, we should not eat rabbit food because it's against commandment, and I would say, where does it say that? So in the same sense, I was like thinking that, oh, God doesn't prohibit, and if He prohibits something that God does not prohibit, then we are breaking God's commandment. But when I looked more into we live in the internet age where the library of knowledge is just in the fingertips, and you can access the amount of information that we have never imagined. There are tons and tons of information, and this is such a critical situation here that why would somebody would turn their head heedlessly away from such important, like you're telling them, don't even believe it, at least go sit down. You have so much time during the day to watch movies and waste your time or other a lot of things. Sit down and just give some time and just research on your own and come to conclusion that what exactly circumcision is. People don't even know what it is. I didn't even know. My journal thinking was that it's part of the body that is protected during the pregnancy, and just like umbilical cord, it has to go. But for your own sake, please go and search. Don't take our word, my word, or your word, or anybody's word for it. Look into what exactly it is. The video you sent me was like a 2 hour long video, and it was just a dense information that it took me more than 2 hours to watch it. I would watch it, I would ponder upon it, I would think about it, I would look into more information, and came to conclusion that this is a tragedy to the human race, big tragedy, and we were still becoming victim to them. And I would
Yeah,
just tell people, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, my message would be like, don't believe on us at all. But if you get information, check it out for yourself. Maybe 10 years down the road, and you look back and you're hitting yourself in the wall. My God, had I paid attention to something so valuable, I would have saved at least few souls from this tragedy. It's very tragic, very tragic. Go ahead, Salomon.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, well, I think I kind of forgot what I was going to say actually, but I mean, it is, it is, tragedy really. Well, it's a, you could come back to me. I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah, I think the world is moving towards banning circumcision on anyone under the age of 18.
Yeah.
I think there are forces that are trying to make that happen.
Yeah, I think it's sad. What I was going to say, that it is sad for people who call themselves submitters, and with the belief that they decided to follow with Quran alone, that they decided to bring in all that corruption back into the religion, and call it submission. I think that's the worst part, because they're opening the door for all kinds of other corruptions also. They'll find more things. I mean, I don't think it stops at circumcision for these people who made it part of their religion, especially, because they have given up the idea that the Quran is complete. And so when you do that, that means that you're gonna bring in a whole lot of other stuff. And I mean, we see that, like people among them, the same group of people, have brought in like little things here and there, not as significant as obvious as circumcision, but like things that they started prohibiting. Like, some of them have started promoting the idea that you don't have to perform Hajj until the Arabs are annihilated, you know? And so they're like, oh, yeah, we're not going to support them. We're not going to go for Hajj. So they have prohibited themselves to go to Hajj, for example. And in the past, like, they had false understanding of zakat and, misunderstandings about, other things. And but the thing is, when you lose the basic principle, that the basic fundamental concept of your religion, that Quran alone is our only source of guidance and stuff, more stuff is going to creep in. Like, in the future they'll see more things, and the devil will weave them in further. Like, he got them through this. He found a loophole, and so he'll weave them into even more corruption. But it doesn't matter if they're more corrupt or not. I mean, the fact is, if they believe that way, they're already off the path. But it is sad just seeing that, God has given us a purified religion that's so pure and beautiful, and we have been blessed by God to have all of that with the mathematical miracle and everything. And then people just, go back to it and try to brand it as submission,
So when the verse 6, Surah 6, number 19, and it's 19, says, say whose testimony is greatest? Say God's. He's the witness between me and you that this Quran has been inspired to me to preach it to you, and whoever it preaches. Indeed, you bear witness, there are other gods beside God. Say, I do not testify as you do. There is only one God, and I disown your idolatry. So when it says the whole Quran, and it's more like a question. So when God says the whole Quran, so we don't, first of all, you don't hold any religious duties beside Quran. And if you do that, then you have another source that is teaching you, and that source become your God, and you're idolizing, you're completely out of the picture. But at the same time, when the whole Quran, I mean, we have to uphold the whole Quran, right? We cannot pick and choose something that is easy or not. When we do that kind of behavior, we are also in the danger, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, of course. You have to first accept that, the Quran, the whole Quran, and nothing but the Quran. Then applying it, obviously, some verses are harder to apply than others. You try to apply them.
Mm-hmm.
You might not succeed in applying all of them in your life, but at least the first step is that your belief has to be established. But if you don't even have the belief to begin with, obviously your actions are gonna be off the path, right? But if you have the beliefs in place and you're working towards it, you are on your way, like to being redeemed by God, and also God is like, and God, knowing that you're at least trying to apply them in your life and worship God alone, you're doing it. God will forgive a lot of your sins. But the thing is, the verses that you read, based on these verses, if your belief is not there, even all your righteous works they're just going to be nullified, because idol worship is an unforgivable offense. And that's the real tragedy. Is even as God says, in the Quran, you look at the subtitles, the tragic statement. They follow their parents blindly, and this is part of it. Right? They see their parents and everyone else doing it, and they're doing it because they're all doing it, and they're like, why would they all be doing it if God didn't want it to happen? That's an argument that they think is going to hold value at God. It's not.
So that means that one of the reasons is that why are you in this religion? Even I would think that even a submitter child born in a submitter family should have some responsibility. That what if they should question too, in the sense that whether their parents are right or wrong. I mean, this is a sort of test everybody has to go through to look at the evidence, look at the information that brought to them, and examine it, and then accept. Blindly accepting what you get is also even wrong.
Yeah, it's like also when you, like Ahmed said earlier, like there shall be no compulsion in religion. So
Right.
you're already imposing your religion on the child by doing it, right? Because the child may not want it. I mean, you see all these adults that are against it now, right? So the chances are your child could be one of them who's going to be not who's going to be one who says, I didn't want this to happen to me. And the thing is that you're doing it to another person against their will. When we see these people that say you have no evidence to say that this is not from God, says there's no compulsion in religion. So that's kind of I will give to the definition of your worshippers. I will command them to distort the creation of God. I mean, it's a satanic thing to want to mutilate other people, especially against their will. If someone wants to go and mutilate themselves and harm themselves, that's even bad, but that's upon them. But then you going and doing it to another person against their will, especially when they're at such a tender age, and traumatizing them in many ways. I mean, that is an evil thing. But when people say, well, you don't have any evidence to say this is not from God, I mean, this is from God, that this is not from God, I mean, is kind of baffling, because obviously also we know that God says in the Quran that God gave Abraham Salat, Zakat, fasting, and Hajj. When we look at the Bible, it says God gave him circumcision, right? So there are two. To me, I don't see it as, okay, he could give him circumcision and he could give him this. No. Why doesn't it say, did he give him these four, or did he give him that one? And the fact that one commandment violates so many other commandments, and in the Quran, obviously it's falsehood. So any intelligent, sincere reader of the Quran should be able to come to that conclusion very easily, that this is not part of the Bible. The Quran talks so much about how these Jews, they traded away God's revelations for a cheap price, and disregarded part of the scripture, and the fact that we don't find Salat, Zakat, fasting, or Hajj in the Bible, like almost at all, should teach them that they messed up the practices big time in those scriptures. And so you're not going to look into the Old Testament if you want to follow the practice of Abraham. And then going to the common person to try to find out what those practices are, what the religion of Abraham is. You go, instead of going to the source, which is the Quran, you go and find out from your friend in school, what is Abraham's religion. Like, literally, that was a comment that I heard in that conference that they recently had. One of them said, oh, if you go and ask anyone, I had a friend in class, and I asked her, so what is the religion of Abraham? She said, what did God give Abraham? And she said, circumcision. It's like, that is your source of truth, that you go and ask your friend in your class. That's obviously telling you something, right? So anyways, I think I'm just going on and on at this point.
Yeah, just like in the past in Surah 6, they say inspired him to mark the animals, and there's a whole section about livestock, that if they're dead, the females can eat; if they're not dead, then only male can eat it, and all those sort of things in there.
Yeah, and it's interesting also, because when it says that I will command them to distort the creation, and then it says, I will promise them and entice them. So it's a promise. It's like, you know how he says,
I think someone, I don't know, we having connectivity issue.
I don't know what happened to Solomon. He was driving.
Yeah, it's been like 2-3 minutes. I haven't heard from
I
him.
think he drove to some place without good connection, maybe. I don't know. So we have been sidetracked from the verses.
Right.
So,
That's so true. I don't know if he's is Nudrat here too?
I don't know. Seems like many have left.
Just give it a minute and let's see if they'll come back.
So I wanted to talk about verse 21, or rather, just in general, the topic, end of the world. I think a lot of people have issues with the end of the world.
Right.
But it makes no sense because the world is ending eventually. So why does it matter if it ends tomorrow or the day after tomorrow? It doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter.
Yeah,
It's
that
just
is a good point.
The world will end, and that's a fact. So why are people so bothered with knowing when it will end? Or the idea of knowing when it will end? Like many I think many are scared that it will create chaos. Oh, the world will end. Let's do this and let's do that. I think that's the main issue, with knowing when the world will end. But that just exposes that those people are bad people anyways. So, and the end of the world is just an excuse for them to do bad things. So, yeah, so, but yeah, so why does it matter when, if the world is, like, knowing when the world will end, like, so what? That's great news to know when the world will end. You can plan better.
Right. It's pretty sad how people are hung on to this world, and people have children, and the society where I come from, they try desperately to have a boy in their family so they can carry their name after they die, and it's like a legacy that my name will be going on. And what does that matter? Once you're gone, you're gone. So many powerful people have gone, nobody even remember their name or something, and you're responsible for your own deeds. And once your chapter is closed, who cares what happens? I mean, even if the day of judgment is 10 billion years ago, what does it matter when we only get like 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe 100 the most years? If you really don't smoke and no alcohol and you exercise and try your best, I mean, God is in control of your life and death. But just for the sake of the argument, 100 years the most you can stretch out, and the last 20 years is just, we are pretty much old and cannot do much, and we walk a little bit and we get short of breath and we cannot eat what we want, going to the doctors. And this life is, and the first 10, 15, 20 years is just we are struggling to learn about self, and then the next 5, 10 years going to school, and then they get married and struggling about balancing home life to work life, and what boss is gonna say, I got this problem, I got that problem. And when you get to 40s and 50s, your kids growing up, and then you worry about them getting into trouble. I mean, this life, why would people take this life so seriously, where every step is just, you never know what's going to happen. And coming back to the point, if it's 100 billion years ago, the day of resurrection, when we leave, do you ever seen anybody coming back? No. Find one person, just one person in the world who has died and come back. No, I'm not talking about near-death experience, but who came out of the grave. Just like the Michael Jackson song, Thriller.
Like zombies.
Yeah, coming out of the graves. Unless then, it's pointless. And you have a God. What is he saying? Surah number, let's see, let me pull it up. Surah number 22. And let me go to that. Verse number, I think it's 15. God is like openly welcoming people to invitation, open invitation, and the subtitle is happiness now and forever. I mean, if you don't believe it, I mean, it's so sad to not even try it. At least one should have tried. And what it says, if anyone thinks that God cannot support him in this life and the hereafter, let him turn completely to his creator in heaven and serve his dependence on anyone else. He will then see that this plan eliminates anything that bothers him. So this world is full of issues. Every time you go to work, people are saying, that happened, my back is hurting, my child, this and that. Always there's some issue where God is inviting you happiness now and forever. I mean, it is pretty sad on the day of resurrection. if this question is asked to somebody, so did you get that verse? Yeah, I read it. Did you even at least give it a try without?
Yeah.
I mean, the sad part is that if somebody tells you this company offers such a good pay, salary, and benefit, you just come and bring these two pieces of information, and you will have just such a nice job and good pay and everything. And the sad part is that you didn't even try the few requirements they have, and they can be easily obtained, and you didn't even try it, and you just walk away. I don't believe it. That's the sad part. Very, very sad part.
Yeah, it also reflects lack of belief or conviction, that they don't dare to put their life completely in God's hand.
Yeah, true. It's like Satan is calling them, what are you doing? Come back. There's nothing there. Come back.
Yeah, and it's the argument against it is always fair. The only argument there is only fair. Oh, you will lose money. You will lose this. This will happen. This will happen, and this will happen. It's always the fear of some loss or something. Just fear. That's all Satan has, fear. And that's the only thing Satan can do to prevent us from trusting in God. And that he uses fear to prevent people from putting the trust in God alone.
Go ahead, sorry.
I noticed, for example, when I'm working and it's some like complex work with many parts that have to go together, but I don't realize that until afterwards, and all the parts have come together without I'm doing anything.
Right.
So somehow all these complex parts that require effort and energy and time, they came together to match like perfectly without me putting any effort into it. Like I did nothing.
Exactly.
And then you sit down and think, well, wait a minute, that's impossible. that's a coincidence. That's not coincidence. But you would think it's a coincidence. It's like throwing up. You throw like what are they called? Dice. Like 5 dice. Dices.
Right.
And they all show the exact frequency you need, the exact numbers you want. That's impossible. I think it was like 5 or 6 numbers of dices. I don't know.
Right.
But the probability will be 0. Yet I'm working, I'm completely oblivious that this work has all these elements to it. I don't understand. I don't know how complex the work is. Like I completely forgot about certain parts to the work. Yet somehow it all matches up, and I didn't do anything.
Yep, that's so amazing.
How is that not proof of God's existence? Like where are the scientists? That's tangible. That's evidence. I don't know.
Like when you first learned to ride a bike, it was hard, and then you have to balance the steering with the which side you're falling and keeping it straight up, and it requires a lot of attention in the beginning, and after a while, then now if you ride a bike, you don't even pay attention. Bike is straight up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mechanical thoughts. Because bike cannot be by itself straight up. Your brain is controlling the balancing act. Because whenever you're falling whichever side, automatically your steering will go that way to keep it straight. And you're not doing it. You did it in the beginning, but now you're not doing it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's like instinctive.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about something completely, something I'm completely unaware of, and
Right. Okay. Yes.
something I'm not even like. There's no training, nothing. I didn't plan it. I don't know, like I don't know how
And
to
you you
explain it.
you you were able to
It's
do
just
it?
it was random. Like
Oh,
what
I thought
happened?
you meant to say on the something like you've been doing over and over. Now you don't even think, and the parts goes together.
Ah, no. Like some
Okay.
work, like maybe
Right.
I'm working on a website and I
Right.
completely forgot certain elements and whatever, but somehow it all matches up anyways,
Masha Allah.
without any preparation, without anything.
Right. Masha Allah. That's amazing. That's absolutely God's blessing. It gives a sign and miracle that there is God and He's controlling everything.
Yeah, but to recognize those circumstances, that's I think that's also a blessing.
Right. I went to see if Nidrat was on, but I don't think she's on. She made a few comments in back few months. I know you guys all are pretty much on it. I think it was in May. That absolute happiness, and she was so strong about that in that statement that if you are in God's kingdom and if you're obeying God, like this verse right here, where God says, let me go to it's verse number, I think, 14. We just did the Quran study, 18, verse number 14. And God says, we strengthened their hearts when they stood up and proclaimed, our only Lord is the Lord of the heavens and earth. We will never worship any other God beside him. Otherwise, we would be far astray. Here are our people setting up gods beside him. If only they could believe, if they only could provide any proof to support their stand. Who is more evil than the one who fabricate lies and attribute them to God? So here these people, they just stood up and they said, we're not going to worship anybody else. So she was pretty strong, and that if you are in God's kingdom, and even Messenger of the Covenant has said, read my lips. Not a headache will even, I mean, he went that far that nothing will bad happen to you. And it's up to us how much level we want to extend ourselves. So when I was coming into submission, and this was when I read all this and this makes sense and it matches with 23 different verses in the Quran that the believers of God, and the one we just read in 22:15. So if anybody does not believe on this, that's mean they don't believe in the word of God, basically, right? Because this is a greatest, it's not God just said in one place in a gray type of area. God is his black and white, 23 different places. So when I came to submission, I was such a gullible, happy, oh wow, this is awesome. And then I would read this and I would listen to Rashad Khalifa and I'm like, wow, this is true. And this is what God is promising. So shall we have no doubt. So I did 2 sermons about this and I had a hard time explaining, I mean, not hard time, but people had a little bit rejection to this, that they said that their submitters, their thoughts were like, yeah, but things will happen to you. You know, you need insurance, you need something backup. Yeah. Then one of the guy was something like saying that in Surah number 26, when Abraham says that when I get sick, he relieves me, he makes me well. I'm paraphrasing. So then they say Abraham was such a strong believer. He got sick. So that's mean things will happen to you. And at the same time, this person is saying, yeah, God is saying that absolute happiness. But at the same time, they're rejecting this idea. So, and then another time I had a sermon where God says that absolutely heart rejoice when remembering God. You know this verse, right? And forgetting this the verse. And so when you remember God, it says absolutely heart rejoices when remembering God. And then this also had a hard time explaining that when you remember God, does it rejoices you or not? Are you happy? Are you addicted to it or not? Do you get bored? So these are the critical questions. So then I heard different conversation, like somebody said that if you're not rejoicing when remembering God, that's mean you're not remembering God hard enough. So you have to focus more. And I'm like, that's not what it means. If you go back on that verse, the previous verse, and God says that God, I'm paraphrasing, God guides those who obey him. God guides those who obey him. These are the one, when they remember God, their heart rejoice, absolutely heart rejoice when remembering God. So if you backtrack to the previous verse, that gives you the clue that whose hearts rejoice when remembering God? Those who obey God. It's not that you, like this person said that you are not remembering God hard enough, you're not putting forth focus. No. If you obey God, then God will make it. And I'm noticing a lot of this also, that people have a hard time grasping onto that information and this phenomena, and they don't try hard enough to see where. And I told them, just go back in the Quran, read over and over, see where I am wrong. Like if there's a machinery that is broken, and what do? You diagnose each system until you find the problem and you fix the problem, and then the machine starts working again. You take your car to the mechanic. He's not going to know right away. He's going to run through a computer test, and he'll tell you, okay, I think this is the problem. And you say, nah, I don't want to. Your car will have a problem. And you say, oh no, these cars are not good. They'll have problem. No, there is a problem. If you go ahead and fix it, then the car will run fine. So rather than finding out and spending some time to find out where am I wrong, because the benefit is so much better that when you watch something movie or something excitement, how much joy that it gives you. But God says, remembering God, heart rejoice. Do you think that there's anything equal to that? Wouldn't be a human being would be running after reading each verse, trying to find out, diagnosing his system. Where am I wrong? To find out, okay, I think I'm making mistake here. Let me correct that. And at the same time seeking God's help. But rather than that, human being try to find excuses to reject the idea of absolutely happiness now and forever, and finding excuses to justify that. And that's the point.
Yeah, I think people have a lot of issues with perfect health. For example, you could argue, what if there's an accident? Well, God controls everything. If you get hurt because of an accident, then guess what? You deserve to get hurt.
Right. True.
So it's a like endless argument. Like, what if? No, you will have perfect. Everything will be perfect. But let's say you eat a lot of chocolate.
Right.
And you have a lot of caffeine. And then you have something called caffeine withdrawal, which can cause headache. You did that to yourself.
Right.
Or if you open the window, it's winter, you open the window and you're naked, standing in the window. You're hurting yourself. You are the one doing that to yourself, trying to get sick.
Yep.
There are a lot of things. But there's a difference between that and perfect, what God promises us, perfect health and perfect peace of mind and all that. I think people are mixing the two up. like intentionally hurting yourself can't be blamed on God. It doesn't refute that there is perfect health and perfect happiness and perfect peace of mind. So I think people are blurring those two things.
Right.
And then about rejoice when God is mentioned, I think it's talking about when God is mentioned.
Remembering God.
You remember God, you feel great, you feel good. It's not saying about you mentioning God and you rejoice in. How do I explain? For example, you meet someone and they mention God, you rejoice, you become happy. For example, the other day, some Jehovah's Witnesses knocked on my door and they started talking about God, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's, I rejoiced in that someone mentioned God. I was like happy to hear people talk about God, but of course they are a bit on the crazy side.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, they mentioned God, and it felt good. So it could be a misunderstanding as well, or what that actually means to rejoice when God is mentioned.
Let me see the verse.
As I understand it, it is when someone else mentions God that you begin to rejoice. That's how I understand it. And what does it mean to rejoice? The heart will rejoice. What is the heart going to? The heart just pumps blood. That's it.
Okay, so it's actually rejoice. But if you look at the meaning, it says feel or show great joy and or delight. So the verse is they are the one whose heart rejoice in remembering God. Like you're sitting down and you're remembering God in any way, you're doing zikr in your head or thinking about God. So your heart become happy. And then the same verse, the next part says, absolutely by remembering God, the heart rejoice. So so God saying, when God says in the first part of this verse, they are the ones whose heart rejoice when remembering God. That is more than enough for God to say to us that when you remember God, your heart will rejoice. But God strengthens that statement by saying, absolutely. Like if an order came from such a high supreme power, they have to just make a statement and that's more than, but the most gracious says, absolutely. Shall be no doubt in your heart. There is no way that if you remember God, your heart will not rejoice. It will rejoice. But so they were discussing that maybe you're not remembering hard enough. No. Go back to the previous verse. Then that is 13:27. That God says, those who disbelieve would say, if only a miracle could come down to him from his Lord, we would believe. Say, God sends astray whomever he wills and guides. Pay attention to this one. And guides to him only those who obey. So what we need to do is obey God, and God will guide us. And then the next word comes 13:28. They are the one, those hearts rejoice by remembering God. So that clarifies whose hearts rejoice by remembering God. Those who obey God, right? And God will obey them, God will guide them, and they are the one. So if our heart is not rejoicing, gotta go back in the Quran and try to find out, where am I making mistake? Because you're missing the fun, the party in rejoicing. That is, the joy in it is so much strong, so much good. That will make you weep in the middle of the night, make you cry.
Yeah, but it can't be faked. So
No, you don't have to show it. You by yourself alone.
Yeah,
You'll be
yeah,
by
of course.
yourself alone,
But I don't
and
think
you.
someone should force themselves to feel it.
Yeah, that
It
is
should
fake.
come
That's fake.
naturally as you
Naturally,
develop.
yes. You don't have to force it. I like suppose when you fall in love for the first time, you don't force it. You just see somebody, you fall in love. You cannot
Mm,
control your feeling. This joy comes naturally when you remember God. Your heart just have butterflies in it, and you just
mm.
so excited and happy inside. And this is I'm
Yeah,
just reading the Quran. I'm not making anything
yeah.
up. You can go
Yeah,
back
no, but
13.
you mentioned people who said you have to like try harder. Like that makes no
Yeah,
sense.
that is wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
That's turning it into something fake almost,
Right.
like like a social thing. Like,
Yeah.
did you rejoice last night?
Yeah, that is. I
Like
mean,
a measurement to like a competition
yeah,
or something.
yeah, true. That's so true. So that's just an invitation from God. Like when we reading the Quran study right now, it's 18:28. God said, "You shall force yourself to be with those who worship their Lord day and night, seeking Him alone. Do not turn your eyes away from them, seeking the vanities of this world. Nor shall you obey one whose heart is rendered oblivious to our message, one who pursue his own desire, and those and whose priorities are confused." So this is you shall force. Are we forcing ourselves? This is another commandment in the Quran that if one is not forcing, not even trying. So just imagine that. I mean, I can understand some communities have no submitters. There's a lot of online options,
Mm.
or just sitting down, opening Quran and reading it. I guess you have no
Yeah,
option.
I think people take it to the extreme as well.
Mm.
Like moving many miles to be
Right.
with submitters when they should actually be um, sharing the message with their family, relatives, neighbors.
Right.
That's their responsibility.
So where's everybody else? You gone?
I don't know. They all dropped out. It's just you and me
So,
now.
oh my God. I actually gotta go too.
All right.
Is the live stream still on?
Yeah, I think it's still on. Let me see.
Oh, okay. So
Okay, so I will turn off the live stream. So,
okay.
what is this? All right. So we have come to the end of the stream. Thank you for joining us. We will do another one on Wednesday. I don't. So we will see you then, inshallah.
Sure.
God willing. Take care and Assalamu Alaykum. Let's see how will you stop. Okay, there.